whole raft of positive evidence. Evidence that has developed over the last 50 years from half a dozen different scientific disciplines that points powerfully and persuasively toward the existence of a creator. This is where it really gets exciting. These new discoveries just blew my mind. I talk about them in my book. There's much more detail, but I want to go through many of them in the next few minutes to give you a flavor of what science over the last 50 years has discovered. First category of evidence I want to talk about is cosmology. Cosmology, big word, all it really means is the study of the origin of the universe. Where did the universe come from? Now, for centuries, scientists were absolutely convinced that the universe is eternal. It always existed. It was always here. But thanks to dramatic new evidence that has been uncovered in just the last few decades, virtually all scientists are now convinced the universe had a sudden beginning in a giant explosion of light. This has led to one of the most powerful arguments for the existence of a creator. Follow this argument. Number one, first, whatever begins to exist has a cause. Right? Isn't that true? Whatever begins to exist has a cause. Absolutely. Can you think of anything that has begun to exist that does not have a cause behind it? Even David Hume, probably the most famous skeptic of all time, said, quote, "I never asserted so absurd a proposition as that anything might arise without a cause." Everything that begins to exist has a cause. That's the first premise. Secondly, the universe began to exist. As Stephen Hawking said not long ago, virtually every scientist now concedes that the universe and time itself had a beginning at some point in the finite past. So if whatever begins to exist has a cause, and if virtually every scientist now says the universe began to exist, the conclusion is obvious. The universe has a cause. Do you see how this provides powerful evidence for the existence of a creator? In fact, Arno Penzias, who won the Nobel Prize as a physicist, and he discovered some of the evidence that helped establish that the universe did have a beginning. Listen to what he said. He said, "The best data that we have concerning the origin of the universe are exactly what I would have predicted had I nothing to go on but the 5 books of Moses, the Psalms, and the Bible as a whole." What an admission from a Nobel Prize-winning physicist. Just give me the Bible, and just reading that, I would have predicted exactly what the scientific evidence now shows us. The universe had a beginning, and you know what? Whatever begins to exist must have a cause. Now think about that. Cosmologists now know that the universe began in an explosion that included a shower of photons. What are photons? They're light. They're light. As the Bible says in Genesis 1, verse 3, quote, "God said, 'Let there be light,' and there was light." When I interviewed an expert on cosmology for my book, The Case for Christ, or the Case for a Creator, he said something fascinating to me. I just want to quote him. He said, "What's really important to understand, Lee, is how reversed the situation is from, say, 100 years ago. It is now the atheist who has to maintain, by faith, despite all of the evidence to the contrary, that the universe did not have a beginning a finite time ago, but is in some inexplicable way eternal after all. Now," he said, "it is the Christian who can stand confidently within biblical truth, knowing it's in line with mainstream astrophysics and cosmology." He said to me, "Lee, it's the atheist who feels very uncomfortable and marginalized today." So cosmology goes a long way toward establishing scientifically that there is a creator. But before we move on, a lot of people say, okay, well, if that's true, what about God? Who created God then? And the answer is, nobody did. So you have to think about the argument. The argument is not whatever exists has a cause. The argument is whatever begins to exist has a cause. And God, by definition, is eternal. He never began to exist. He always has existed. In fact, before he created the universe, time itself didn't exist. There was just timelessness. But scientists are virtually unanimous in saying that the universe, based on the scientific evidence, did begin to exist, unlike God, and therefore it needs a cause to explain it, and that cause is the Creator. And by the way, atheists should have no problem with believing that God could be eternal, because for centuries they maintained the universe is eternal. They didn't have a problem with the universe being eternal. I don't see how they can have a problem then with God being eternal. So, Cosmology is a powerful category of evidence to establish that there is a creator.